lively streets of Harare tonight, a little bit more subdued. I think let's go to Delaware. Joining us now is U.S. Senator Coons, who sits on the Foreign Relations Africa Subcommittee. We spoke to you before Mugabe fell, Senator Coons. You heard the voices there. Incredibly happy on the streets of Harare tonight. Are you optimistic about the future of the country now?
Well, Kathy, this is an historic moment for the people of Zimbabwe. As you've mentioned, for 37 years, Robert Mugabe has been a president who was initially a liberator but gradually became a dictator. The economy is in a shambles. There's been many violations of human rights and ways in which democracy has been thwarted since the 2008 election that Mugabe lost, but somehow maneuvered to be able to remain as president. I am hopeful that there will be a peaceful transition of power. Mugabe has resigned and has called for a peaceful transition. But this will be up to the people of Zimbabwe and regional leaders from SADC and from the African Union to insist on an inclusive and an open process. My hopes are that the transition will respect the rule of law and will lead to an open and inclusive election in which there will be a democratic process to choose the future leadership of Zimbabwe that can reform the economy and repair the health of the country.
Senator, we've been here before with other African leaders who've been deposed, and the lesson is that there is a very short window, very small window, for the international community to get in there and enact some reform and get the economy working again. What could the United States do to help Zimbabwe?
Well, the United States, as you know, imposed fairly strong sanctions against Zimbabwe many years ago, against both Robert Mugabe and some of his inner circle of advisors, as well as impacting the country as a whole. The United States continues to provide significant amounts of humanitarian relief because of the famine, the drought, throughout Zimbabwe, but we do not provide any direct government-to-government assistance. If the new government of Zimbabwe presents itself as being more transparent and more open to reform, the United States could consider lifting some or all of those sanctions. We could be a strong partner with Zimbabwe for its future development, and along with our vital ally, the United Kingdom, and others throughout Europe and the world, we could create the environment for a significant improvement in Zimbabwe's economy as long as there is respect for human rights and the sort of transparency and democracy that has been lacking for the last 37 years.
But you will also know, Senator, that there will be a scramble for control in the ear of the new government, whatever shade that government is. China has been a very big partner for Zimbabwe in recent years. It is likely, isn't it, that the West will try to move in and perhaps regain some of the control that it had?
Well, my hope is that the transition will be one that will allow for more openness. It seems likely that Emerson Mnangagwa will be sworn in as the new president, and that Morgan Tsvangirai, the opposition leader who was the winner of the 2008 presidential election, will play some role. It is my hope that these gentlemen and others will view the transition as an opportunity to establish new standards for conduct, for rule of law, and for openness to engagement with the West, in particular the United States and UK.
Senator, we're seeing live pictures coming in from Harare as you're speaking of soldiers on the top of tanks being embraced by people on the streets of Harare. Of course, they'd had a tricky relationship with the military for so long, but today at least they feel very excited about it. I want to pick up on what Christian was saying there, and that is this balance of power in Africa with the Chinese. Are you concerned that China steps in? It really has the clout in what is a fairly important southern African country in America at a time when America is withdrawing its influence around the world.
Yes, I'm very concerned about the lack of an active, forward-leaning presence by the United States. I think the last American delegation to visit Zimbabwe was led by my friend, Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona. He and I and two other senators and a congressman visited southern Africa in February of 2016. We actually met with Robert Mugabe, a truly memorable, troubling, long meeting. And I share your expressed concern. I think that China has a significant foothold in Zimbabwe. They trained many of the liberation struggle leaders, and they have a strong economic presence. China and the United States have a different approach to engagement in Africa. They do not advocate for democracy, a free press, human rights, and instead are much more interested in economic relationships. I think it is a long past time for China to stand up for international standards in terms of how we conduct business across Africa, and for the people of countries like Zimbabwe to have a voice in the future of their nation.
Okay, Senator Coons, thank you very much for joining us. Well, one of the few